Hello, and welcome to More Intelligent Tomorrow, a wide-ranging exploration of the potential impact of AI on the world around us, as envisioned by the future heroes of the human and machine intelligence revolution. Can we help AI begin to feel less artificial and more like a natural augmentation of ourselves? We'll discuss this and more with Dan Wright on today's episode. And now, guest host, Nick King.
Hey Dan, how you doing?
Doing great. How you doing, Nick?
Pretty good. I think a lot of this conversation for today is just getting to know you and a lot of the things you've seen along your journey. But I always like to start with something really personal. So you're a lawyer, but you're not a lawyer anymore. So run me through, you put all this time in law school and everything went on. How did you get to that point? What led you to that?
I grew up in a really small town in Northern California, and the whole time I was there from when I was very young, all the way through to this day. I had a group of me and four other best friends. And so one of those people, a guy named Brian, he called me and gave me the news that one of my other best friends had passed away unexpectedly. His name's Jordan. And the way it happened and how it happened, this guy was about as healthy as you can be. He was a all-state, football player, wrestler. He was the picture of health. And freak accident happens. He dies. It was so shocking that I literally, I'd spent all day, every day studying. I just dropped everything that I was doing in that moment, broke down, and I left Boston in the middle of exams. I flew home and spent time with Jordan's family. I wrote his eulogy. I delivered the eulogy at his funeral. I gave a lot of reflections about everything that we had done together. He was a groomsman in my wedding. We had lived together during college, about as close as two people can be. And I really just, after that, reflected on what am I doing? What do I even want to do? What do I want to deliver to the world? What impact do I want to make? I really had that conversation with myself. Do I even want to go back? Why am I even in law school? Do I want to be a lawyer? Maybe I should have thought about this before I paid all this money and, moved to Boston. But I realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to be a courtroom lawyer. I actually had a job clerking for a Supreme Court judge in Massachusetts. And, he had the most interesting cases you can possibly get. And I still realized within, a couple of weeks that it wasn't for me. And so I focused a lot on getting experience working with companies and especially entrepreneurs. I realized pretty quickly in law school that I was interested in, building companies and what it takes to bring a company from nothing, from an idea to something, large and impactful. And kind of set off down that road.
Yeah, I mean that's clearly something that's anchored in your mind of that moment when everything shifted.
And the other thing that I did is I talked to his mom, Liz, who I actually spoke with this weekend, still very close with. And she said to me that the best way to honor Jordan is to not waste my life, to try to figure out a way to make the most of my life. And also, hey, maybe along the way, I'd find a way to honor him and everything that he meant to me. And that was the moment when I decided that I wanted to change course in my life. I decided to go back, finish law school. Definitely wasn't the best grades I ever got, but I made it. And, then went on from there.
And then where to from there? How did you end up in this tech space? How did you end up in the commercial side?
What's funny, so I actually graduated from law school in the middle of the recession, and I was working in nonprofit, actually in my hometown, back in Auburn in California, where I'm from. And then I got a call out of the blue. We were staying at my in-laws who live in Washington State, and it was one of the partners that I had become close with at this law firm when I had worked there during law school. And he said, hey, I actually just moved to one of the largest law firms in the world, Goodwin Procter, and I'm creating their West Coast tech practice. And how would you like to be my first associate? And I said, that sounds great. The only catch was I had to be in San Francisco and start in a week. So we dropped everything. We went down there, a little bit of a whirlwind, but it was, ultimately how I got into law.
Hey, so Dan, you mentioned a non-profit when you were in California. What was your non-profit for?
Yeah, so I went and worked at Legal Services of Northern California, which they call it LISNIC.
Okay.
Not that catchy, but that's what they call it. And I was sitting at this very small desk in between the copy machine and the coffee machine. And so people were like constantly bumping into me. And I was like, I mentioned I didn't want to do courtroom, uh, litigation, but I actually ended up doing exactly that. So I was in landlord tenant court in my hometown almost every day. Pretty fascinating stuff. Like, people, eviction cases with people in, mobile home parks. And there were some crazy cases that I read and that I, argued in front of judges and did that for a little while at this nonprofit, Lisnick.
Yeah, that must be super interesting. Do you take any of those skills forward from arguing for tenancy agreements to what you do today?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You think about when you're talking to, an investor, when you're talking to the press, when you're talking to our employees, when you're talking to a customer, you're always, objection handling. You're trying to be persuasive, and even when the facts sometimes aren't in your favor, which was sometimes the case with these kind of cases. So a lot of that I did, take forward. And again, it was another example where if you think about the law, you want to talk about a place that is ripe for some disruption with AI and machine learning. The law is definitely one of those. I mean, how it has worked historically is you take this massive body of case law that's developed over hundreds of years, and you have to search through all of it. To this point, it's been manually to find what cases actually matter, and then you have to make, you know, from pages and pages of these cases briefs that are very persuasive, and you have to give those arguments to the court. And so imagine how many hours that takes, and lawyers charge by the hour.
Yeah.
And so if you could automate some of those processes, which now you can using platforms like DataRobot and what we do with natural language processing, like that's a huge opportunity to save what was frankly my least favorite part of the job. I hated to do that. That was if I could have just argued in front of judges all the time, I'd have been all in.
Why do you think it hasn't been disrupted yet? Surely other lawyers have hated that same thing. Why has it not been fixed? Why has it not been solved?
I'll give you 2 points. One is incentives, and the other is technology. On the incentives, think about what incentives a lawyer has. They're paid by the hour.
Hmm.
So they're actually incentivized to take as much time as they possibly can, and automating them would actually, really hurt their top line. And so the incentives are off. The other thing is the technology. There wasn't AI that was actually accessible to a lawyer, right? A lawyer is not typically also a data scientist. And so even if they were incentivized, even if they had the will to automate a lot of the work that they did manually, they didn't have the technology until things like DataRobot came into the world that can actually do all of the things that we did manually as lawyers using machine learning, and do it in minutes versus hours, and do it actually with a lot more accuracy, making sure that you don't, oh, whoops, I missed that case. Which I will tell you, that's the worst feeling in the world as a lawyer being in that courtroom when you realize that you missed a case. Somebody else, your opponent cites a case, and you're like, oh, I didn't know about that one. With machine learning, you could actually go in there, having spent a fraction of the time to prepare, and do a better job because you'll never miss those cases. But again, the technology hasn't existed until fairly recently, and then the incentives haven't been aligned.
And there's real implications to getting that wrong, right? Like if you miss that case, people can be hurt, go to prison incorrectly. Like, there's real implications for getting that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. Even think about what I was doing with landlord tenant law. Like, that is certainly not as dramatic as, a death row, murder case or something along those lines. But it's people's housing, right? It's the difference between somebody having a home and somebody being on the street and maybe wrongfully put on the street. And so
Mm-hmm.
I took that very seriously. And the reality is people get it wrong all the time. Why do they get it wrong all the time? Why do they miss cases? It's because they are overworked. We're literally working until 2, 3 in the morning every day, starting work again at 6 a.m., including weekends. Of course you're gonna miss stuff. Of course you're gonna miss stuff. And that is scary when you think about the implications on, real people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, you're one of the hardest workers I know, but you also lead with empathy in the way you do decision making and bring that to the front. Everything from your stories of how Jordan changed, the way you lived your life to the way that, his mother influenced the way you made decisions to, how in law you're able to like look at what the actual impact of, these actions are for people. And I wonder how that informs your leadership style today, how that empathy of yours, guides you sometimes, especially being a lawyer and being so logical. Like, tell me a little bit how you balance those two parts of your leadership style.
I always look at it in terms of what how can I help people at the individual level in a way that helps the company at that level and helps all of our shareholders at that level and helps society. One of the reasons I came to DataRobot is we are uniquely able to have a massive impact on society and on people's lives. And that you don't get at every company. You don't even get it at every technology company. That's why there's nowhere else that I would want to be. One thing that we really focus on is personal growth and actually stretching yourself, taking risks and increasing types of risks over time in a way that stretches yourself. And how can you do that? You can do that when you are supported, when you have people who actually do care about you and want you to actually move in the direction that you want to move, grow in the direction that you want to grow, and build your dreams. And that is what we do at DataRobot. And that is why I love to do what I do. And then you think about our customers. I've seen people get promoted. I've seen people get awards. I've seen people who may have been looked at as a cost center or even a burden on the business be completely transformed. And now they're looked at as driving one of the most strategic priorities across the entire company. And like the impact that that has at the personal level. And then, of course, also for our customers, that ends up having a big impact at the company level and at the societal level. One thing that we talk about, you hear me talk about creating an iconic company. One of the things that that means to me is that we we empower our employees and our customers to change the world. And we're actually seeing that play out. I mean, think about some of the use cases, the work that we've done with everyone from, the Department of Health and Human Services, making sure that they are making the best possible decisions when it comes to things like the vaccine trial locations and, even now the work that we're doing around opening up schools, so the K through 8 reopening, or think about the work that we do with the hospitals who are trying to figure out staffing and how many ventilators do I need in hospitals, or you think about the work that we're doing with all of the leading retailers in the world to figure out how many of a particular type of turkey or cranberry sauce do I need on Thanksgiving to make sure that everybody can have their Thanksgiving dinner here in the U.S. And I just think about those stories, those personal wins that people are having, and then I also think about the impact that again, our employees and our customers actually have on society.
I think this sort of segues nicely into the next question, which is, AI sounds like this powerful tool, right? We're changing people's careers, not just employees of DataRobot and our customers, but it has an influence on potentially this law idea that we were just brainstorming, or how things happen and reopen, and it affects lives. Like, it's this powerful tool. Like, how do you think about the responsibility of being this dream factory with AI, and how you take that to market? Like, how do you shoulder that as a CEO of a company like DataRobot?
I think it's a really important topic because I also look at what's going on in the market historically, and a lot of people have not ever actually received value, and they also haven't trusted their AI, and they frankly shouldn't because it's been a black box, and they've had a bunch of disjointed point solutions or open source tools that wasn't truly, enterprise grade, and there was no telemetry into the value that's actually being created and the problems that are being solved. And as a result, you had no trust, zero. And so I think about it in terms of with the types of problems that we were talking about, whether it's in law, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's any industry, right? We talked about retail, but manufacturing, the travel industry, like there's so many different applications of the technology. And until, DataRobot came around, largely people were not getting, to value. And we still have a long way to go. Like we've helped a lot of companies, but even with those companies, there's so much more we can do. And there's so many that we haven't even spoken to yet. So I view that as a huge responsibility to help. And then I also think about it in terms of this trust idea. And that is one reason why DataRobot and why right now, there is a huge amount of these use cases that, as we're talking about, impact the world, they impact society, but they also impact the individual at a very human level. And if we're not giving accurate predictions, accurate decision intelligence, then we are doing a huge disservice to everybody. And so, that's why I really am proud to work at a company that takes this idea of trust so seriously. And, we've obviously had a significant team that's been dedicated to building trust into the entire platform end to end. And as a result, we can actually sleep and help our customers sleep at night, knowing that we're going to deliver that, again, accurate predictions, accurate decision intelligence that solves real problems.
Yeah, I love that as we dive into this concept of trust. In some ways, people have been sort of scared of it, right? Like it's been this topic that people sort of don't talk about, and it's been a complicated topic. Talk a little bit about how you think about educating the world on DataRobot's view of trust and your view of trust.
Yeah, we could talk for an hour on this. It's a big topic. And I think it, dates back to the Terminator movies. Everybody thinks AI is coming for them, and everybody should be very afraid. But, the reality is AI, to me, and again, if it's trusted AI, it's actually about empowering, we like to say, the human heroes of the intelligence revolution, right? Mm-hmm. Empowering people. Machine intelligence actually empowers human intelligence. It frees you from monotonous work so that you can actually focus on the things that count, right? Picture me back in the, house when I was working at Liznick. It frees me from hours and hours of tedious case law research so that I can actually think about how do I present this in a persuasive way. But then there's all the other examples that we talked about. And so it's a huge topic. I also think it's very timely, right? If you look at the proposed regulations in the EU, and there's similar conversations going on right now in Washington, D.C., where I was last week. And they're talking about, for all of your critical models, all of your models that are being used in production to make important decisions, that you actually need to certify them. You need to have some confidence, and you need to have trust, and a system that actually allows you to trust the accuracy of your models, the fairness of your models, the governance of your models, the bias or lack of bias in your models. And, I think that this is going to be a huge trend that's going to continue for years where, people, again, every company's rapidly becoming an AI company, but you can't do that if you can't trust your AI. And even if you wanted to try to put your head in the sand and say, I'm not going to worry about that, which frankly, it's amazing to me. A lot of companies have done. They have all these models in production that they're relying on, and they haven't even looked at them in 6 months or a year. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And now that's not even going to be an option, I think, because I think regulation is coming, and so you need to be thinking about it. You need to be in front of it in order to make sure that you continue to get the value, because ultimately every other company is going to be doing that, and you don't want to get left behind.
There's a perspective here which you have, which is really unique, which is this concept of applied and production AI. What advice would you give to someone that's embarking on this project to solve some critical problem, sees AI as a way to solve it, but how do they get it to production, and how would you support them? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing I would say is to measure the value that's being created. That's one huge gap that there's been in the market. And that's when when I talk about experimental AI, think about the fact that, many companies were spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on their AI initiatives, and they weren't actually doing anything to measure the value that's being delivered. Would you run any other part of your business that way? Not if it's a very good business, right? And so now what we're doing is we're actually measuring the value that is being delivered. And then through the automation and the end-to-end life cycle, we're able to dramatically accelerate the time to value. And we're also lowering the barriers of entry so that if you're a data scientist, again, human and machine intelligence, we're giving you superpowers. We're allowing you to automate all of the really manual tasks that you don't need to do, so that you can focus on solving hard problems, and you can do it at warp speed, right? We have a lot of data that shows that our data scientists that work with DataRobot are 3 times as productive on average as data scientists that don't. So why would you want to be 1/3 of the data scientists that you could be? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then when you think about people like me, and I won't speak for you, Nick, but I think you have more data science experience than certainly I did when I joined DataRobot. You're able to actually unlock machine intelligence, unlock this superpower for yourself in a way that empowers you, and again lowers the entry to be able to use this technology to solve problems that really matter.
Hey, so Dan, what I love about how you position and think about this is this element of machine intelligence and the human. And, I think there's a really important juxtaposition around how those two pieces work together and how they augment each other. So I'd love to get some of your thoughts on how you've seen this work. And is this really the future where there's machines and humans working together, or is it humans getting smarter, machines getting smarter, and somehow they coexist?
When I first really dug into AI, I started thinking, as why artificial? Like, artificial intelligence, artificial is a word that I think inspires fear in people versus talking about empowering people, which is really what we're doing. And so in my mind, the A is not for artificial, it's augmented. It's about augmented intelligence combining human and machine intelligence. And I'll just give a really concrete example, specific example, because I always think those are the most important, most helpful anyway. One of the things that we've done now is, because we have this end-to-end platform, we can build apps that solve really hard problems for any industry. And not only can we build apps, and this will be a thing that we'll talk about more as we go throughout this year, partners can create apps on top of the platform. Customers can create their own apps on top of their platform. The future is a very bright future filled with these AI-powered apps. And one of the apps that I like to give as an example, because it's really easy for people to understand and it illustrates some of the concepts that we're talking about, is an app that we built that screens resumes. And many of the, Global 2000 and large government agencies, they have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of resumes that they have to parse through. And there's been a team of people that have done this manually. And it's not just that many resumes. It's also for very specific roles. Think about banks who need to recruit for quants. That is complex stuff to find really good people. And those are, people who you end up paying a lot of money. So the cost of being wrong is really high. And then you have to think about things like bias and fairness in your hiring practices. And, frankly, I don't think that people think enough about that, but I think people are starting to think more about that. And what we've done is we built an app that can, within minutes, go through all of those resumes for any role when it used to take, days, weeks, months. And, if you take the example of quants, you had people who are some of your most highly trained, highly skilled, highly paid people, and they're spending all of their time going through these resumes. That doesn't seem like a very good use of time. And then on top of it, people have their own biases. Everybody has their own bias. And a lot of us are unaware of the bias.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're spending all of this time going through these resumes when we could be doing other more productive things that are better for our companies, better for society. And we're making less accurate decisions, and they're also biased decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've done is we've automated that whole process. We say, hey, this is the of all the candidates, this is the group that we actually think we should hire. And we have bias and fairness monitoring built into it. So we actually make you aware of the bias. You could still ignore the bias if you want to, or you can adjust it, and it may, there's trade-offs there. But the point is that you're aware versus unaware. And then ultimately it's the human who decides what to do with that information. But we've now automated a very highly manual, low value task. We've created visibility into things like bias and fairness. And we've also increased the accuracy with which you can make decisions. And what does that do? It allows all of those people to, at the end of the day, have the final say in terms of what the action is that's taken, what's the decision that's made, but do that with all the available information in front of them and with confidence that they've done this in the best way that is possible given the current state of the art, the current state of technology. And so, again, that combination of human and machine intelligence, I keep going back to the superheroes. Maybe with my kids, I've been watching too much Avengers now, but I mean, it feels like superpowers that people have now, and that's going to be exciting to see that play out across every industry and all across the world.
And so you're telling me that you could apply this concept of human to machine to almost any industry, any application in what you're building at DataRobot.
Any industry, any application. You think about, that just the example I just gave, everybody hires people. Mm-hmm. That applies to any industry. So there's horizontal applications, but there's also vertical applications. Let me give you an example. One of the ones that one of our partners has built on top of the platform, and there'll be more coming out about this very soon, is a application that is optimizing demand forecasting for manufacturers. And why is that so important? Well, when I talk to the CIOs or the CDOs of these large manufacturers, what they'll tell you is that they have such a massive volume of stuff that they produce, cars, chips, components, you name it, that if you increase the accuracy by even 0.5%, it's billions of dollars of ROI. So if we lower the barrier of entry so that people like you and me that are making those decisions about the supply chain make that decision a little bit more accurately, it generates billions of dollars of value. That's pretty powerful. And that's just another one of many, many examples. You can go to every single industry, and this is going to happen. These AI-powered apps in every industry. And it's going to happen very fast because now there's a platform that enables that.
I love it. Hey, Dan, I mean, I've really enjoyed our time today. It's just so impressive to hear your story and just the empathy and just the depth of understanding you bring. I love the production element, the way you think of the business problems. There's always this element of what's the impact of the business? What's the impact of society? Before we close off, is any parting thoughts? Anyone you want to hear this message that you want to kind of shout out? Anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
One I'd say it's been great. So thanks, Nick, for spending the time. And I would say, I guess first off to our employees, thanks for everything you're doing to bring this dream, this vision of augmented intelligence, human and machine intelligence to life. To our customers, the true human heroes of the intelligence revolution, thanks for making this happen in every industry and all across the world and showing what is possible now and inspiring everyone around us, including me, with what you do every day. And I guess I would have to thank my wife, Betsy, for still marrying me despite the sleeveless NorCal shirt, the trucker hat, and that really bad earring. So I guess those are some parting thoughts.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We're going to keep talking about this at AI Experience on the 11th of May. So you can also go to aiworldwide.datarobot.com to sign up and hear more from us and dive into the technical details and everything we put together and a lot more than just what we shared here today. And Dan, just thank you so much for the opportunity to chat today. I really enjoyed it. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Nick. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.